Morning. Thank you so much for coming. So this is what 10 o'clock on Sunday morning looks like. I think Shobhaa and I both had visions of nobody turning up because I don't think any of us is ever awake. Are you awake at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning?
Not at all. I'll be sleep talking through this, but we'll try our best.
She's had
in fact, we had a little bet that there'll be 7 people. He said, no, I think there'll be 9. So
we've both lost. But so thank you so much for coming. We
Thank you.
appreciate quite how early it is and quite how barbaric it is to do this at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. But thank you, and we hope you won't waste your time, which you never do when you have Shobhaa there to talk to. The book is called, we're actually here to flog a book, so we'll talk a little bit about it. It's called 70 and to Hell with It by Shobhaa De. And the session is called Those Were the Days, Vir Sanghvi and Shobhaa De in conversation, which sounds, you will admit, like a bunch of old farts sitting around and talking about how wonderful things were when they were young, which was a very long time ago. But we're not going to do that. I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the things Shobhaa has been involved with most recently, which are actually things that probably wouldn't have happened when Shobhaa and I were young, but do happen now. One of which, of course, is that you've had death threats.
well, I think the death threat epidemic in India, especially targeting media, is something we all need to wake up and say, this is alarming in the extreme. When that happened, it was right after Gauri Lankesh had been murdered, and some of us had spoken up against that murder and the brutality of it all, and against people who were not only indirectly endorsing it, but certainly there's complicity when you keep quiet when something like that has happened. Those of us who did speak up were targeted by a gentleman,
Using the term in its looser sense.
who was not nameless. He was bold enough and audacious enough to identify himself and talked of serial assassinations of 5 women journalists. I happened to be on that list. I was about to shrug it off, having lived with that and worse in the past. But the police came to my door yet again and said, these days, do not take these threats lightly. They offered police protection all over again, and I very politely declined it. I had lived with it for 2 years, and frankly, it's a waste of state money, and they should really be doing their jobs protecting more important people. It serves no purpose, because if somebody wants to get you, they can. And secondly, to live with that kind of fear in a free and democratic country like ours, I refuse to do it. I refuse to live looking over my shoulder, looking for someone on a motorcycle with a helmet coming, a coward with a gun. Yeah. So I said, thank you very much. They said, will you write off on it? Will you come to the police station and sign off on it? I said, I'll be happy to do it. So that ended that. But that doesn't end what we are seeing, the atmosphere in India being what it is.
Who was the guy? I mean, who was the man who wanted to kill you?
I don't care. All I know is he's followed by a prime minister who did not unfollow him after.
Hang on. You're saying that the man signed his own name to this?
That's right. I don't even remember it because that's how little importance I gave it, but it's there in the public domain.
And he's a real person.
He's a real person
followed by Narendra Modi on Twitter.
That's absolutely correct. And he was identified by the police. He did not deny making those death threats. And of course, as things happen in India these days, the story died right there.
Hang on.
There was no follow-up.
No, I'm going to stop you. This man who identifies himself, makes a death threat, says he's going to kill you. The police know who he is. Yes. Do they lock him up? Do they do something? No.
They merely go and talk to him. He repeats the threats, and that's where the story ends. So we have no idea.
At this stage, presumably the Prime Minister says, I cannot follow a man who threatens murder, and I will at least unfollow him, if not lock him up, right?
In an ideal India, yes.
So what? Just kidding. What actually happened? Did the Prime Minister unfollow him?
What happened was that on various TV channels where I was asked about this, I did say that it was distressing, disappointing, alarming, that I'm assuming the Prime Minister doesn't know every tweet that the people he follows, and there aren't 10,000 people that he follows. It's a number less than 2,000.
Yep.
They have...
Large enough to fit into RCR because he invites them there to felicitate them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they're felicitated at various occasions. Also, he has a crack team handling social media. So it's not possible that he's not aware that there are people like him. It's not possible that he's not aware of the controversy this has generated. All he had to say was that this is shameful and distance himself. Nothing happened.
No, all he had to do was unfollow the guy, right?
I asked on TV channels, why doesn't the Prime Minister unfollow this man? And there were 4 other men who were part of the same group. And I was told, no, the response to that, official response was, the Prime Minister does not believe, it's against his principles to unfollow anybody, not even thugs and murderers. So that was that.
What's the principle?
Ask him.
All right.
He doesn't believe in unfollowing, but it's okay to keep quiet when it's happening. It's another kind of principle, I suppose.
Welcome to today's India. Yeah. You've also had familiar antagonists going for you. There was a controversy quite recently when you, as a proud Maharashtrian, spoke out against the government of Maharashtra's law or regulation requiring cinema halls to show Marathi films. Tell us about that.
Well, it was not imposed, it was suggested that prime time viewing at multiplexes should be of only Marathi cinema. Now, I would have said exactly the same thing, that you can't dictate prime time viewing. It's a commercial decision taken by multiplex owners.
Sure.
Had they said, anybody, that prime time viewing has to be restricted to Korean cinema or Swedish cinema, I would have said the same thing. You cannot dictate timing. And in the same context, I said, well, if it's going to be Marathi cinema at prime time, maybe instead of popcorn, we'll be eating vada pav and misal, dahi misal, which are popular Maharashtrian snacks, which I hugely enjoy. That was seen as an anti-Maharashtrian statement, and that I was mocking Maharashtrian culture and its cuisine. And so the mobs came with vada pavs, which they wanted to stuff down my throat. They said it very crudely in Marathi, that they wanted to gag me with the same vada pavs, blacken my face, and all, of course, for the benefit of television cameras, all the TV people had been summoned for this spectacle. And they expected me to hide at home. The police were all over the place. There were at least 50 policemen in my home that morning, late afternoon. And they advised me not to go down and face these people. They said, Kuch bhi
How
ho
many
sakta hai.
people were there?
Could have been 400.
Oh my God. And no doubt 100 television crews as well.
But of course.
Of course, yeah.
Well positioned.
Yeah.
So, it's that moment that you decide, what do I do? Do I cower at home and not confront these bullies? Or do I go down and see who blinks first? So I did go down. And
You actually went down?
Yeah, I went down.
Okay.
Of course. And I'll do it again.
You were not scared?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Go on.
No.
Go on.
It is ridiculous that they can come and terrorize a citizen who's expressing an opinion. For heaven's sake, it's not leading to rioting on the streets.
Sure.
I'm not inciting murder. I'm not abusing anybody. I'm talking about a preference, a snack preference at a movie theater. So what are we even discussing? So when I met them, these are all paid goons. You pay someone $50 or even less, they'll come and shout slogans.
Rent a mob.
Yeah, they'll just... I was more concerned about my neighbors' property and cars being damaged because I have to live with those neighbors. And they're going to turn around and say, we don't want this troublemaker in our midst. So which is understandable. If my car was trashed because of some lady talking about vada pav, I'd get very annoyed. So I did.
So you went down and you confronted them?
Yes, I did.
What did they do? Did anyone assault you with a vada pav?
No, they presented it to me.
Really?
A huge, So
How big was it?
It was a gigantic, what would you say, a tokri full of vada pav.
Oh,
and
wow. It's a Guinness Book of World Records vada pav.
It said Shiv's Shiv Sena vada pav. That's what it said, a big label. So I immediately took a picture on my phone and tweeted it saying delicious. So that provoked them and enraged them still further. But, we are not allowed a sense of humor. We can't mock ourselves. Forget about mocking anybody else. We can't mock the system. It is decided what we're going to eat, think, drink, who we sleep with, what we wear. Because right after when Akhlaq was murdered, that was for me...
That's Muhammad Akhlaq, who was murdered over beef eating in
That's
UP.
right.
Yeah.
And I was so deeply disturbed at that point that I did tweet, and remember the context of what the country could have gone up in flames at that point. It was a very, very touch and go. I felt incensed that possibly a completely innocent man, regardless, had been killed, lynched by a mob looking for beef in his refrigerator.
Yeah.
So I had tweeted, I have just consumed beef, come and murder me. Again, the cops came. And they said, and my family was absolutely, I mean, they wanted to disown me many, many times. This was one of them. And they said, you have no business to be saying something, but I was not saying it to be provocative. I was saying it that, how dare you? How dare you? If you can do that to that man, do it with me. Come, try it. And if thousands of us had said it at that point, believe me, it wouldn't have come to what it has. We didn't speak up. We could have. We should have.
Which is really the key question. Why don't more of us speak up? I mean, in the case of the man who issued a death threat, a criminal act in any country under any law, not only does he roam free repeating the death threats, he's followed by the Prime Minister of India. In the case of Muhammad Akhlaq, this poor man who was murdered for what was probably not even beef, they've got away with it, the people who killed him.
And no one to speak up for Akhlaq.
And not one person.
Not even today.
Yeah. And even now, there are all of us, I think we consider ourselves liberals, we believe in free speech, and yet we say, yeah, but you know, there are some excesses, but broadly it's okay. India's on a path to development. What's happened to us?
You know, there is development and there is development.
Yeah.
I am more concerned with moral development and a moral position. Financial, economic, commercial, military development is something else.
Yep.
But how does a nation look itself and its citizens in the eyes? How do we stand tall if we don't have the moral right? If we are denying that right to other citizens, they can't live their lives the way they should and can in a democracy. If we continue to call ourselves a democracy, then we need to redefine what that democracy means to the establishment, and whether the citizens agree with this version of democracy. To me, this is not democracy at all. So I feel it is something I feel very passionately about, and frankly, the silence from Delhi media is something that I find abhorrent, because all these years, Delhi media has played ball with the establishment. Sure. They continue to play ball.
Never as bad as today, though.
Never as bad as today. I mean, they're supplicants, they're stooges.
Yeah.
So how can we, as a nation, with a very powerful reach of the media, surrender so meekly? What is left?
I think it was Mr. Advani who said, after the emergency was over in 1977, when he was Information and Broadcasting Minister, about the media, that when you were asked to bend, you chose to crawl.
That's right.
We are in that situation again, aren't we?
We are not even crawling. I mean, we are lying down at the feet of power and say, walk all over us, trample us. It's fine. Just don't hound us and don't prosecute us. But there should be more of us saying, send me to jail for if you think what I'm saying is in any way a criminal act. Yeah. They cannot do it because nobody is committing those criminal acts. We are merely exercising our rights as citizens and as spokespeople for a lot of people who are not in media, who may be expecting media to show some spine and a direction and provide the strength it needs in a democracy to say it's okay to speak your mind. But apparently it's not.
But I take what you're saying, it's not okay because people followed by the Prime Minister will threaten to kill you, because the Shiv Sena will organize demonstrations. But there's now a new element. For the first time, if you express a liberal point of view, television channels, the media, will have debates in which they'll crucify you. That's never happened before.
Well, one of the main reasons that I completely quit being on any of those absurd panels on television is because of that. There is no credibility left of any kind. It's a slanging match. It's gone beyond rudeness. It is crass. It is insulting. And only those poor Pakistani generals appear night after night
Why do
and
they
are
come?
flogged.
Yeah, but why
Are
do they come?
flogged. I think they're paid. That's what I'm told.
$2,000 was the figure I heard.
$500,
$500.
even cheaper.
Not even
discount,
that, not even that.
Discounted rates. So apart from those Pakistani generals and spokespeople for the party, it's their dirty job to appear on those channels and often defend the indefensible. The rest of us, why should we do it? For what? Why should I bother to appear on any of those channels and express an opinion that I feel sincerely about, only to be shouted down by people who are out of control and who call people like myself names like liptard, prostitute, and worse. So that's a considered decision, and I hope to stick to it unless something makes me change my mind, which is something that I feel I'll be able to contribute something of worth that people might be listening to.
I described us at the beginning of this as a pair of old farts. We've been around for a long time, and I think we've seen the sort of, if you will forgive the expression, ass-licking nature of media when it comes to power. But when do you think it got to this stage where it's not just enough to lick the ass of who's in power, but to crucify everybody else who expresses a different point of view?
Speaking to power was something that the media did exceedingly well. Now, I have lived through the emergency myself. I've had VC Shukla telling me at an editor's meeting, I will hang you from a public square at Flora Fountain.
He was INB minister then, and you were editor of Stardust.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, having lived through that too, and I said the same thing to him. I laughed and I said, do it. Yeah. So though it's not as if terrorizing or intimidating the press is something new. We have all had our share of dealing with that. But what is new is the press had the guts to fight back earlier. Yeah. The press had a conscience. At least a lot of those people during that time were legendary editors and owners of publications. The Indian Express is about the only one I can see that's still holding out and following the Ramnath Goenka's principles. And he was one of the only few really strong editors at the time who challenged Indira Gandhi in the emergency. You see less and less and less of that because the compromise is so, it's so obvious and it's so alarming. It has a lot also to do with commercial decisions.
Explain that.
The commercial decisions in terms of the press, the print media particularly, just surviving at a time where actually the competition is coming from social media and all the other platforms where people can express their opinions as freely. Every citizen today is a journalist or has the potential to be that. So where does that leave the professional hacks? Where do they get their advertising from? It's all going to websites and all the various new platforms that have come up, and legitimately so. But having said that, Vir, at the time when TV came in the big way, and we were a part of that too, and everybody said with the television channels, multiplicity of those, news channels, print would be dead. But we made our uneasy peace and we coexisted as we continue to. Today, suddenly there's complete panic across the board. Media houses are terrified of losing revenues, but what they should be more concerned about is losing respect and losing clout. Revenues aa jayenge yahan se nahi to kahin aur se, but how do you replace respect that you're losing forever?
I don't know how many people realize this, but you've heard of the expression paid news. It's generally used by people who are paid by the BJP to work in a call center and tweet to us and call us paid news. But there is actually paid news in this country in nearly, I think with the exception of the Express, in nearly every newspaper in the country. If you want your party featured on page 1 of the local supplement, you can go and pay. And they will run pictures of your child, of your mother-in-law, whatever, and they will run it as news, and they will not indicate that this is paid for. For some reason, though, I think Shobha's made a fuss about this, I've made a fuss about this, readers don't seem to care. Isn't that worrying?
They don't care at all. even the so-called society news today, you can buy your way into page 3.
Yeah.
You can buy your front page coverage. You can pretty much buy the entire newspaper if you're willing to pay for that. So I'm surprised that readers who are astute and smart, and one must never underestimate their common sense, know it, but seem to be comfortable. They seem to be all right with it. Especially during election time, when you see those supplements, it's so apparent that big money has changed hands.
And in perhaps not the great metropolitan English newspapers, but regional newspapers will, during election time, circulate a ad sheet saying, to political candidates, if you want your campaign covered with a picture on page 1, this is how much it'll cost. 2 pages inside, this is how much it'll cost. Politicians pay, and we buy the stuff. We don't seem to care.
No, and worse than that, Vir, is when they say, if you want anti-stuff on your rival, that comes with a rate card too. So where there is no balance, there is no truth left, there is no veracity of any of the reports, you can't cross-check anything, there's very little fact-checking, just about anything can go. You know, in the old days, I used to have fun just with putting in typos just to see if the sub-editors were even reading the text in my column. And my test was very simple. About every 2 or 3 months, I'd use the word eclectic, just out of the blue. And they'd inevitably change it to electric. So at least I knew they were reading it. Now, it doesn't matter. The entire column can be called eclectic, and it'll be, there'll be maybe 800 words saying eclectic, and it'll be published exactly like that. Eclectic or electric. The whole column would be electric. No one reads.
Nobody reads, There was a time, I don't know how many people here are aware of Shobha's career, so I'll give you a potted history. Shobha was, though I think she plays this down now, as Shobha Rajadaksh, the top model of her day. She went to work for an ad agency called Creative Unit. The head of that ad agency said to her, let's start a magazine, and they started Stardust. So far, so good. She then went on to create the magazine boom in India with Society, left to start a magazine called Celebrity, left that to start a full-time career as an author. I think we mentioned Socialite Evenings, which was published by Penguin in the introduction. It was the first book of popular fiction in India designed not to win awards, but to become a bestseller, and launched a genre. Is that fair?
Yeah, but interestingly, Vir, because Socialite Evenings, normally your first book is self-revelatory on many levels, because that's the territory, that's the terrain you know best. So it was about the life that you and I are well aware of in Mumbai, specifically South Mumbai. So the book was located in South Mumbai. It had familiar characters, people we have all grown up with and known. But for the rest of India at that time, Mumbai itself existed like a fantasy, not what it is today. So a lot of people at that point asked me whether I had merely created a place called Malabar Hill to rhyme or match Beverly Hills. And that it couldn't...
That was all the Jackie Collins parallels of that area.
That couldn't exist. People like that couldn't exist. That lifestyle I described at that point could not possibly exist. They thought I'd merely relocated some characters from a Hollywood, either a movie or popular fiction like Jackie Collins, and just transported it into this mythical place called Malabar Hill, which has existed forever and ever. There was that strong a disconnect. It's gone today.
But and the book, I lived in Bombay in those days, but some of it even I couldn't identify, but there was like sex in Indian Airlines toilets and aeroplanes and all of that, which, if it happened, nobody invited me. So, it was...
You're feeling so left out.
I know.
Years
even I kept wondering what is going on. So there was that element of...
The slight exaggeration is, I loved it.
Slight, all right,
I loved it. But it's not that it hasn't happened, Vir. I might tell you.
Please tell us more. The audience waits with bated breath.
The strange thing about Socialite Evenings is it broke so many taboos because
Yeah.
I think, especially when David Davidar came and made the offer, it was a commissioned book, asked me to write the book, and he told me with some amount of detachment, a bit of disdain, he said, you know Shobhaa Day? We didn't know each other then. It was the first time we'd met. So he said, you know Shobhaa Day? No one's interested in women's voices at all. There's simply no market for it. No one buys books written by women. And you know, poetry even less, no one's interested whatsoever. So I'm taking a huge chance with you. So I said, I'll show you. Yeah. And that actually changed things. And there were a whole bunch of writers subsequently who wrote in voices which were distinctly female, from a female perspective.
Also, I mean, we won't skirt around this. You were the first woman in
write
India
about sex.
to write
You
about
want to
sex.
say it? Yes.
That was the issue, eh?
Women were not supposed to think about sex, even less write about it. They were just supposed to perform it and then keep quiet.
Sometimes in aeroplane bathrooms, eh?
Sometimes also in the loo. A bit uncomfortable, but possible.
Yeah. And I think you then became, for about 10 years, the biggest soft story out of India for the international media. I think you featured in every foreign publication I can think of as this woman who dared write about sex.
Yeah, it was kind of, after a point, tiresome and annoying because the questions asked, you know, it's a whole bilge about the Kama Sutra and the land of the Kama Sutra, and here's this lady in a sari who's writing provocatively about sex. But at every such, there was a lot of gravitas at some of the interactions at Litfest, and people would ask me 2 questions at the end of a very thundering address from me, which I put my all into it. 2 hands would normally go up. It would normally be, the first one would be a man who'd say, Madam, मैं आपको पूछना चाहता हूँ, वो जब सेक्स वेक्स सब आपने लिखा है, वो अपने खुद के लाइफ पे है ना?
And you would say?
And I would assure him that it's a diluted version. This is nothing.
मैंने थोड़ा censor कर दिया है.
I said, I'm sparing you some of the details. So that would, then he'd say, very seriously, he'd say, okay, thank you, madam. And so, then would come a lady who'd put up her hand, and no matter what I may have said, she said, madam, how do you preserve yourself? And I'd had the same response for the longest time. I'd say, in vinegar. So they'd ask, but it wouldn't satisfy them. They'd come later and say, but how do you do it actually, the vinegar? So I said, I soak myself in a tub overnight. Then they said, do you splash it on your face? I said, of course. Then my children told me, stop it, your ridiculous sense of humor. They're going to damage their eyes or something, and they'll blame you for it and say you recommended vinegar on the face. So I stopped making the joke, and I actually started telling the truth, which is Pond's cold cream. And they don't pay me for saying this. And that's all I've ever used.
Well, among the things you did, as I briefly outlined, was you invented film journalism as it now exists. Neeta's Natta was probably the most influential column of its time. English. You invented the use of English, which nobody had ever done before. Sort of sophisticated English with Hindi words. Yes. You invented the celebrity genre. There would be no page 3 today without Shobhaa Dey.
Thank you.
So you have to accept.
That's too generous a compliment.
It was not meant as a compliment.
It's too generous. I'm not used. I'm not good at handling compliments. I'm so used to the other. So the use of language at the time when I started using English, it was street speak. It was colloquial. It was fluid, and it was beautiful to the ears. It's how we speak. It's Bambaiya combined with many other, the slang that is commonly used in the streets in Mumbai, Delhi, elsewhere in India. But, of course, the critics turned around and said, this lady, poor thing, she really doesn't know how to use the language. English, when she falls short of words in English, she throws in a Marathi word or a Hindi word and twists it all around because actually she doesn't know how to write English. So that went on and on and on. And after 10 years, English became mainstream.
Yeah.
Times of India started carrying headlines using English. Yeah. So, at that point, I said, that's dull and establishment, now forget it. So I stopped using it myself because, establishment,
But
boring.
you also pioneered the use of nicknames, no? Stardust was the one that invented. I'm trying to remember.
Garam
Garam Dharam,
Garam.
Shotgun for Shatrughan Sinha, and for poor Yogita Bali, Asli
Asli
Ghee.
Ghee.
I remember that. I'm trying to think what you said about Rekha. It wasn't very nice from what I remember.
Yeah, idli.
Idli, something for Amitabh Bachchan, so you just banned. So there was a white space where there should have been Amitabh Bachchan.
But who called him the angry young man?
Did
And
you
it
call him
stayed
that?
with him. Yeah, it
Yeah?
was almost all the names that Stardust gave at that time have stuck. So Shotgun Sinha, without perhaps understanding what the implications of shotgun actually may be.
You called him
Very
Double
probably-
Bore, which was quite
Double
clear.
Bore was also very good because he just talked too much.
Yeah.
But he very in his book, he very proudly proclaims that Shotgun, Double Bore were names given by Stardust and myself. And Garam Dharam, of course, absolute darling. So when I meet Hema, and she's just done a wonderful book, Ram Mukherjee has written it, about, she's turned 70 herself, or is going to very soon. Garam Dharam and their relationship, the whole North-South, was for me fascinating on many levels because there's such a history to it. Yeah. The South Indian beautiful Tambram belles who come to Mumbai at 17 and then fall in love with married Punjabi men. I mean, there's a whole list of them. So that is a book in itself, how many of them there are. And Stardust was not just, it's now in retrospect, there have been so many books and serious studies about what it meant at the time and the kind of doctorates that have been done on that and my work and English. Was a flag post which was telling us a lot about ourselves and a changing India, including the language, including the idea that you can mock and, mock stars who were treated like gods and demigods and goddesses, and that you could bring them down to earth and no damage done because their job was to deliver on screen, which they did. So the film industry is a fantastic, brilliant, dynamic place, Bollywood. It is.
But you also, now everybody watches Hindi cinema, but in those days, a lot of people didn't watch Hindi cinema. They watched only English movies. You created a film magazine for people who didn't watch the films.
Well, it was kind of reverse snobbery.
Yeah.
Because it was considered kind of infra-dig to say that I watch, Manoj Kumar films. It still is, I think.
Yeah.
But
there was
Manoj Kumar
no
films,
Karan Johar
but
or anyone in those days.
Karan Johar didn't exist. He came and turned that whole tide around and changed the genre of more. And of course, we have Sanjay Leela Bhansali, who's got his own brand of cinema, which I totally adore. And
You've
I still
seen
don't know.
Padmavati?
Yes, I have. I don't see what the fuss is all about, and I'm saying it in this state.
How was it as a movie?
I mean, the Rajput should be at his feet in gratitude for the way they've been projected, quite honestly. So I really don't get it. There's nothing remotely offensive about their depiction. There could be many other things we fault with the movie.
Is it like a good movie? Or
it's a Sanjay Leela Bhansali movie. Good, bad, indifferent. Call it what you want.
Which is nice,
you
but
look for it.
Nice, but you're ducking the question.
No,
Is
I'm
it a
not.
movie?
It's gorgeous. I never duck questions.
Okay, so is it a good movie?
It's a gorgeous film. Gorgeous to look at. But it's not a patch on, for example, Bajirao, which was very powerful.
Yeah.
And the other one with Ras Leela, which had a ferocious energy about it, as did Bajirao. Now here, if this beauteous and very gorgeous Deepika Padukone is teamed with a Shahid Kapoor with grey and blue green lenses playing a Rajput Rana. And there's absolutely zero. There'll be more chemistry you can create in a lab with test tubes, mixing them. So that was the disappointing part because and of course the way it ended, in a way endorsing Johar and Sati. That, for me, was the disturbing aspect of the movie.
One of the
rest of it, gorgeous.
The criticism that it's regressive, that it's anti-woman, you believe that? Or
well,
I haven't seen the film, so I can say what I like.
Well, no. The point
Hopefully
is,
I won't, but go ahead.
Point is, all of Sanjay Leela Bhansali's films, if you're looking for a message or some sort of a feminist statement, don't watch the films. It is not about that. It is the way he sees and romanticizes mythology or something that catches his fancy. And Padmavati, he himself had staged as an opera in a full-scale opera in Paris
yeah.
a few years ago. And Shyam Benegal had made the same thing, the same theme, the same,
In
exactly
Bharat
the same
Ek
thing.
Coach, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it went without a peep. No one protested.
So why did they protest
It
this
is,
time?
it is obviously a political manipulation. How can you legitimize goons from whichever Karni Sena, whoever they are?
Karni Sena, who are not here, I think, today. But
You know, even if they are, and even if they're armed
hello,
with-
if you were here, yeah. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, really bring it on.
Welcome to the
bring
show.
it
Yeah,
on.
yeah, bring it on. Yeah.
Because those to attack a school bus.
Yeah.
What have the school children got to do with the movie or the politics
The
of
soft
Padmavati?
targets, no?
Soft targets. So we should give them a hard answer, and we don't. And that's why they do what they do. And it's about time we started fixing, arresting, prosecuting, jailing, not just Karni Sena and people like them, but also making the chief ministers of the states responsible, that if they can't tackle a law and order situation of this kind, which targets innocent people, they shouldn't be chief ministers in the first place.
This state? When you say chief ministers of these states, do you mean this state?
These states in the plural.
Such as?
You tell me.
Or I'm asking the question. But I'll say
I'm not
I'll
for-
say it.
go
I
ahead.
say it.
Do
I
it.
think it's incumbent on the chief minister of Rajasthan, just as much as it's incumbent on the chief minister of Haryana, to protect people who want to see films. It's your, I don't want to see the film, but if you do want to go and see the film, it's your decision. No communal filth, no thug should be able to stop you from doing it. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
All right, I think we're going to take questions. Let's see. Yep, all right. Okay. Microphones? Okay, there come the microphones. Okay. Couple of things that Shobhaa says. 2 or 3 questions only, and there's one from my part. All questions welcome. All speeches, I will be very rude and ask you to sit down. So please, no speeches, just ask questions, all right?
Okay, my name is Saurabh Mangal, big fan of both of you. My question is, what is the hope left for a common family man or a common man when, like, people are ready to ignore even the Supreme Court? So if I want to say something about atheism, and you're nowhere away from taboo, you've always chosen to stay away from establishment. So if I want to, so taboo is okay, but how come they can put a law against certain, like, you can't disturb the religious harmony, that's one, and you can't target any particular religion, any religion, 2 laws in India, archaic obviously. So when will this go away? How do you deal with it? I'm sure you have had to deal with it. And can that, your way, be applicable for us common men also, or should we use some other tactics?
Okay.
That's the question. Thank
It's
you.
a complex question. He's saying...
Very complex.
Yeah,
I understood.
you
what
understood
you're saying.
everything, all right.
The point is that so long as we have a Supreme Court that is representing us, every one of us here, we still have a lot of hope, and we should never give up on that.
Yeah.
It's tough to move the Supreme Court. You need resources. You need to hire lawyers. Not every citizen can do it. There is RTI for whatever it's worth. We need more teeth as citizens, and we can actually demand and get that attention for ourselves. But for that, we have to put ourselves on the line and speak up. It can't happen that people can enter your minds and hearts and see that you're feeling upset about something. You have to state it. And today, there's no reason on earth why you can't state it. There's so many platforms available to every citizen. We must use those platforms.
The second question, which was about offending people. He says we have archaic laws that prevent us from offending people. We protest anytime anybody says their sentiments are offended. But the truth is that without the right to offend, the right to freedom of speech is meaningless. No?
Meaningless. I mean, there can be no debate, no dissent, no real thinking if there aren't different points of view. The whole point is to have diversity of thinking. Otherwise, you're a dead society and a dead police state with one opinion, and that's the big master's opinion. And we are in a position right now at this point in our history where all our opinions should count and can count. It's up to us.
Not just the opinions of the big master and the people he follows on Twitter. Right? All right. All right. Somebody else with a question. Let's go back. The lady there.
Good morning. So, sadly, Bollywood is like a huge influence on the Indian population. So, do you think that if the big superstars of Bollywood actually take a stand publicly on an issue, then it will have an influence on the people? Also, why don't they?
Yeah,
yet?
good question.
Good question, but also I feel, this is a slightly contrary view to the popular. You cannot pressurize stars or any public figures to take a position. It's also their right if they don't wish to be in the public domain. They're not there as preachers or messiahs. They're entertainers. If they choose to back a cause, yes, it's a very powerful statement that they're making. If they choose to do it. If they choose not to, it's also unfair to target them for not taking a position and calling them, names for not assuming a role which they have not assigned to themselves.
I think we accept that.
Yeah.
Nobody has the right to pressure anyone to say anything. But her question is, why don't they say something? Why don't they themselves, without pressure, feel the need to stand up for liberal values?
Well, again, I'm speaking as their defense counsel, and I don't normally do that for Bollywood stars. But in all fairness, it has to be said that just like all of us, they are under tremendous pressure too.
Yeah.
The government can tighten the screws. They can look at how. I'm not saying it's a government's responsibility to ensure that films don't lose money. But Padmavati, even in terms of the insurance costs that have gone up, only because of the political manipulation involved, who's going to compensate for that? It is a political action that was taken against the movie. And the stars are also vulnerable because they can be hounded and also...
As Amir Khan was, for instance.
As he was, and as have been so many other stars. They can open up all sorts of income tax, they can raid them, they can challenge little laws and bylaws that they may have at some point broken. So I really don't think it's fair to put that kind of pressure on them. A lot of them do speak up when they need to, and surprisingly, a lot of them, like Preeti Zinta, she took on the gangsters. You remember that?
Yeah, but that's
She did
different
it.
from taking on the powerful political establishment.
But
that they
no,
did.
but the gangsters are always
she
backed
did.
by politicians.
Yeah. And she came and gave evidence in court.
She did. I mean, she could have been on the hit list.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody else? Sir?
Ma'am, you are really bold and beautiful, I must say. And
You make her sound like a soap opera.
now, what message you want to give to modern day women regarding the freedom of speech and expression?
They have it, they should use it. Self-belief is everything.
Gentleman there?
Madam, I was peeved at the way you criticize our Honorable Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, that he is gagging the free expression.
Sorry, start again. We missed the beginning. We got as far as Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Yeah,
but
I was
what did you
peeved.
say before that?
I was peeved.
You were peeved, okay.
Yeah.
That's good because
And
we're
the-
also very peeved. Go ahead.
The blame you are putting, you are putting on the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
That does it not mean that you are insulting the verdict of majority of the people of the Indian citizens?
Oh, that's very,
Majority.
that's very sweet. Go on, yeah.
Huge verdict.
The majority, what
It
is the
was a
majority
huge
you're
verdict.
saying?
Sir,
All voters are usually foolish people that
I
they
agree.
have voted for him.
Sir,
Yeah,
you're
sir.
entitled to feel peeved, and we are entitled to also say what we had to say. And the public is entitled to feel and judge for themselves. Thank you, sir.
and sir, I will just quote back to you the many things Mr. Narendra Modi, when he was in opposition, said about our last Prime Minister. Was he also attacking the verdict of the people who had elected that Prime Minister? All right, somebody else. At the back over there. The gentleman that's standing up, can we have a microphone, please?
Morning. It's been a great session. Just want to ask a simple question. How do you get the press to stand up?
How do you get the press to stand up? I don't know. If you find out, let us know. We'd like to know too, but answer it.
I feel disgusted watching those TV channels, English channels.
Yeah.
So that's a very important question for me. How do you
Yeah,
get
I agree.
Happy to provide ladders,
Backbones?
backbone, spines, everything.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the short answer to your question is she's been on television. I make my living from television. I don't want to say anything about bite the hand that feeds me. But the decline has begun with television. The decline has begun with debates. The fact that people don't necessarily, and this is true of Indians generally, so you can't blame the anchors, don't necessarily want to watch news on television any longer. They're happy to read news on the internet or in newspapers. They turn to television for entertainment disguised as opinion. And you and I will criticize it, but 60% of the total English viewership in this country comprises channels that no longer do news, that only do opinion. I may not be happy with it, you may not be happy with it, but sadly, the majority of India is. Yeah? Shobhaa says, last question. Okay, so who do you want to pick? You choose.
A lady.
A lady? All right, there's a lady there.
Thank you for picking me.
Two ladies now with two mics.
Well, there are two ladies, so we'll have them both. So the first lady who started can start, yeah.
Okay. I have a question about the preservation thing. At what point for a woman with a career does it start becoming a good thing to look younger than your age? I'm a lawyer. I keep getting asked by judges, whose intern are you? My mother's a school principal. She keeps getting nominated for these under 50 awards and then she gets disqualified. At what point does it start working to our benefit?
There's no such thing as your appearance working for your benefit. Honestly, don't look at it like that. You are who you are. You look what you look. As I've said in my book, at 70, 70 is not the new 50. It is very much 70. So you just accept the way your work should speak for itself. And if a judge is making sexist comments, say, thank you, Uncle Ji.
Granddad, why Uncle Ji? All right, there was another lady with a microphone. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, good morning. So my name is Isha, and my question is, I'm in quite a dilemma, first of all. Secondly, before this whole controversy of Padmavati happened, there was this song, Ghumar, in which Deepika Padukone's, like you wear a sari, so obviously there's this space which is
midriff,
not covered.
yeah.
The midriff. So, and after the entire controversy, it was covered. And on the other hand, people say that it's the vulgarity in films and everything that, that which is provocative.
Yeah, having watched the film, Ghumar, that particular song, is a very, very complex song to film. Sure. It must have taken him at least 10 days to make for that one sequence. It's a very expensive shoot, Ghumar, the song. I cannot believe, and I know people from the unit, that it was reshot in order to cover Miss Padukone's midriff. In the film that I saw, I think it's the only version of the film, there was no midriff. So it was generated, this whole thing about her showing her midriff was again a concocted, distorted controversy created by people who have nothing better to do.
So ma'am, how do you justify this hypocrisy? Like for women especially?
Well, considering the men in the movie wore very little in many scenes, it was in fact reverse discrimination. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shobhaa, big hand.